Hello, and welcome to a Zen Master episode of the Drywall Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Harmon. With us today, a man who needs no introduction, owner of CanAm Tools, Wolfgang Dombrowski, and I discuss a myriad of awesome topics, including how he got involved with CanAm Tools. We also discuss aspects of creating tools and why that appealed to him, running a business, and what it means to be successful.
One of my neighbors, he was a construction guy, and he and I made friends. He used to see my lights on late at night, and I'd be working my buns off like everybody else does.
Yeah.
And I remember he came over one day and chit-chatted, and he says, there used to be a guy just across the alley from us here that started this company, and he made tools in his garage, just a few doors down from where I was. Of course, he was gone by that time, but so he said, yeah, he moved into St. Albert in one of the towns, and he says he's got a shop there, and I think he's still making these things. You should go see him. So, I kind of put that on the back burner, never really thought too much about it. And
not only is Wolfgang an amazing guy to discuss drywall and tools with, but he was generous enough to help out the Drywall Podcast and sponsor the months of March and April. CanAm Tools, industry-leading tools that help professionals around the world save time and money. Now, for these months of March and April, you have the opportunity to get your hands on these awesome tools at a discounted price. If you go to canamtools.com and enter promo code TDP15, you can receive a discount on these tools. CanAm Tools is also celebrating 50 years of excellence as the original and leading inventor of the semi-automatic drywall finishing tool. Their line of tools is centered around the compound tube, one of the most versatile tools on the market. The Drywall Podcast is also brought to you by Fresco Harmony, making walls better since 2004. If you're in Canada or globally, you can get your hands on some Fresco Harmony by going to csrbuilding.com. You can get them there. But for now, Wolfgang Dombrowski on the 44th episode of the Drywall Podcast. Let's get into it. We have the great and powerful Wolfgang Dombrowski, owner of CanAm Tools, a young 69, with us on the Drywall Podcast today. It took a while, but we got you here.
Yeah, we got here. Finally, better late than never, right?
Yeah, and the audio's good, and the screen iPad thing is good, so everything is fine. How are you doing today?
Better than I deserve.
Wolfgang Dombrowski. First of all, you probably have one of the coolest names in the industry. I'm sure you've heard that before. To me, Wolfgang is kind of like, I was telling Brad Hanna, I was like, Wolfgang is kind of like the Buddha of drywall. Wolfgang reached out to me a little while, I think after the Columbia interview, and you were interested in the podcast, and you were really curious, right after that, you were like, who is it? So had you listened to a couple podcasts by that time? How did you find out about me? That's kind of interesting.
Well, I think probably on Instagram, I must have seen a few of the reviews or the trailers, that had been put up. And
okay,
that's probably how I started to recognize you. And then, as I think I told you, I phoned you that day, or I timed you. And
yeah,
I think you'd interviewed Columbia, and I said, hey, I'm always on their coattails anyway, so I thought, let's find out what that was all about. And
sure.
And, introduced myself and Of course, I didn't know anything about fresco harmony to my I apologize for that, but I know a
That's
lot more
okay.
now.
Well, I mean, when you're marketing on a shoestring budget, it's hard to get, I've tried lots of different methods, and the drywall podcast was really a shot in the dark, but the response has been amazing, and the community that it's building has really been a byproduct of, originally marketing, a product. But what's happened is that I've gotten to meet a lot of fantastic drywallers, gotten connected, met lots of great people, yourself included. And what a tremendous byproduct of something that, honestly, my friends were like, "You're nuts. That just seems like a huge waste of time." And I was like, whatever. There isn't a drywall podcast out there. We'll give it a whirl, see how it goes.
I think you're doing an amazing job. I really do.
Thank
I
you.
think you're naturally talented for this as well. So hang in there, and I think you'll do well.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's fun, and it's very interesting to not, I think everybody has a story, and listening to Drywaller's story for me, and I've heard this feedback from other people, it helps me connect with that little part of myself that's like, you're less than because you're a drywaller. And the biggest thing I think that I've learned is that that's not the case. A lot of people choose this trade because they're attracted to the medium and they're attracted to this industry. And I think that's really what's being illuminated. Like, this isn't like something that you just do because you couldn't find anything else to do. It takes a tremendous amount of energy and skill and stick-to-itiveness to get to the point of journeyman, in this trade.
Well, it takes a lot of skill, a lot of training, a lot of hours, a lot of
Yeah.
dedication, like any trade, right? It's no less, no more. It may be an easier one to get into initially, but
Right.
it's still a lot of work and effort and dedication to be good at it, like anything.
Yeah, like anything. And did you start listening to the podcast after that? Are you an avid listener? Where are you at with all of that?
I haven't listened to all of them. I've listened to a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a handful. Did you happen to catch Myron Ferguson's podcast?
I probably caught a bit of it. I may not have watched all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's actually been to our location, and actually hired him a couple of times to do some work for us at the trade shows. So yeah, we know each other pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, you like that one. And if you don't know Wolfgang, he's just the nicest guy. He's exactly the same in person as he is on camera. And you admitted, we talked a little bit, you admitted this isn't really your cup of tea. You're more of a background owner of your business. And I appreciate you coming on here and being with us today. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are interested in your story and the story of CanAm Tools and how this whole thing came to be. But before that, I was poking around on Google and I found your LinkedIn, which I sent you an invitation to connect. And it said part-time passion was economic development, transformational change for entrepreneurial leaders of the developing world. And that caught my attention because I love the whole entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
That's an interesting find you got there. Well, basically what I've been doing, and my wife and I have done this together, and I've done it by myself, but we've traveled to different countries, particularly countries in Africa. And we've worked with people there, especially, people who want to get into business. In those countries, it's, there's lots of unemployment, and the only way to actually make some money is to do something, and start a little trading company, or, make something, or figure out how to make a dollar.
Okay.
And so they need lots of help when it comes to, how to start a business and how to manage their finances, and, how to do marketing and sales, and, just how to be ethical and how to be honest and how to, conduct themselves in the real world. So we
Okay.
we teach, the rudimentary basics of business. And
Is
so we
there is there
go ahead.
like a business, like a side, a not for profit business that you run that is focused on that?
No, I don't run anything like that. I usually team up with somebody
Okay.
typically. Yeah.
Interesting. And how did you get into that? Were you like, oh, there needs to be more awareness for these people that are struggling to make a buck. I can go teach them. How did that come to be?
Well, I think that came through our church that I'm a part of, and
Okay.
there was a team of people that wanted to go to Zimbabwe, and my wife was one of them.
Okay.
So I wasn't really that interested. But when I thought about it, she was going to be gone for, I don't know, 3 weeks. I said, I don't want to be here by myself. So I said, you know what? I'm signing up. I'll go.
Okay.
And that was a little bit with fear and trepidation, of course. I've never been there, but it was a little scary to begin with. But it was a wonderful experience, and we met a lot of neat people and got to know
Yeah.
the locals. And there's nothing to be afraid of, right? But
Nah.
it was really cool. So from there, we just got to build our network and meet people, and then of course, being that we're in business, we have a couple of businesses. We actually have a real estate company as well,
Okay.
and we bought commercial properties and things like that over
Okay.
the years. And then we run CanAm, and my wife was very active in the business as well. She does all the finance and
Okay.
bookkeeping. So she's the presidential advisor, she likes to say. Anyways,
Yeah.
between the two of us, we work together and we have fun and do some things outside of working in the business.
Well, let's give a shout out to Faye. Behind every great man is a greater woman,
That's
Very, very cool. Where are we going to go? I read too on the website. Let me give a little pitch here. So, if you don't know, too, the Drywall Podcast is running an ad, if you will, or a spot, a sponsorship, I like to call it, for various months of 2023. And CanAm was gracious enough to sign up for a sponsorship for the months of March and April. And that's a paid sponsorship. If you're out there, we still have July through the end of the year that I'll be running. And that's one sponsor per month. And I think it's a pretty good reach now that we're over 5,700 downloads. It's gaining in popularity, which I'm super grateful for. But I read online, there was a little blog. It said CanAm was founded in 1973, and the process of growth through the years has established a clear and consistent commitment to our customers to provide the highest quality drywall finishing tools that are easy to use and affordable. 1973, what did CanAm tools look like at that point? That wasn't, and you guys, two-part question, that wasn't fully automatic tools. That was the semi-automatic tools. It seems like, did you start out doing semi-automatic tools? You were like, there's got to be a middle point here. You can't jump right into the automatic tools. What about all those guys that just want to put mud on the wall? Or did that start with a banjo? How did that come to be?
all right. Well, back in 73, I wasn't involved in drywall at all. It
Okay.
was, I'm not the founder of CanAm Tool.
Right.
I bought the company in 2000. But in 73, my predecessor was a drywaller, and he was also managing a store for one of the leading builders in Canada. And CanAm it wasn't really called CanAm before he took it over, but the product had been developed years prior, probably, in the 60s. And the reason that CanAm came to be is because Ames was exclusive. They had the exclusivity for tools, and nobody could get automatic tools unless, you could get them from Ames. And there was a contractor here in Canada. His name was Merle Matart, and he had a lumber company, and he engineered homes, and they built them across Canada. They're little, probably 1,200 square foot bungalows. And he would only let his contractors have the automatic tools. And so there was this huge competitive gap between, the drywallers that did his homes and the other guys that, were working on contract as well, but they didn't have access to the tools.
Okay.
So somebody, said, hey, we've got to do something about this. We can't this was a monopoly. And necessity is the mother of invention. So a couple of guys got their heads together and they came up with, with the flushers, and they developed all kinds of stuff, boxes and box handles, and we have a dry taper and a number of different products. But it was somewhat successful. Of course, it always takes years to, really develop a product and make it good. So they got something that worked, and then the owner of Matart Lumber, he bought that company because he wanted to get rid of them, right? He basically wanted to crush them and, get rid of the competition. And so all the assets sat in the back of this shop where my predecessor worked. And
he shelved it.
Yeah, it was shelved. It was exactly put in. And so my friend, my friend looked at this stuff, and he eyed it up, and he thought there was a really good opportunity here. And one day I guess he had shares in the company as well, in the Matart Lumber Company. And he said, hey, how about I trade my shares in this business and you just give me the assets for, those tools? And they thought it was a great idea because they didn't want them anyways. And so he took them and developed the product in his garage. And, and then in 1973, he actually had some tools that he could sell and started showing people how they worked. And it was a success.
What was his name?
His first name was Fritz.
Fritz.
Gentink. Yeah, Fritz Gentink. Yeah.
Okay.
He was a Dutchman. Actually, his dad used to make wooden shoes. So this guy was amazing. He could work with his hands, and he could pretty well make anything, on a shoestring, by the way. Yeah.
Sure. Interesting. So he grabs these tools. What are the first tools that he comes out with in 1973? And he's competing against the automatic tools at that time.
I would imagine he came out with the flusher and the tube. Those would have been, and the applicator, inside corner applicator, would have been the most, essential tools for doing corners, rather than, were you using a hawk and trowel or a pan and knife to do a corner? You can load it up with an applicator, with the applicator tube, and then run a flusher. You've got it done in a matter of minutes, rather than.
So you're talking about the compound tube that was developed like out of the gate.
Yeah, that was something that was being developed. What had happened is that they took the bazooka, and they basically separated it. The bazooka has two functions. One, it applies mud, and two, it applies paper tape. So they just split it in half and said, hey, we'll just do the application of the compound. And then they developed a dry taper as well. So then they had an applicator. So it was a two-step process. Yeah.
And what the dry tape applicator, is that still in market today?
It's we still have some, but we're working on a new design, to be honest with you. We've got something.
Because that was kind of moot. I mean, you can have a spool on the side of your pants and like wring out tape and put it on there. It's not, doesn't seem like that big a deal.
Well, the nice thing is it's got the reach, right? It's like a bazooka.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So those tools would come out. Where does he go from there?
That's a good word. Where does he start marketing? Well, probably locally, just, amongst his friends, his buddies. I'm pretty sure that, he wasn't really all that successful to start with, because nobody really knew the product. But He told me a story one time where he went to one of his buddies' job sites. The guy was taping a house, and he went there with his tools to, show the tools. But he saw his buddy there working in one of the rooms with, conventionally with the knife and pan or whatever, and and the music was blaring, I guess, and whatever, So he thought, I'll just. So he snuck in, basically in one of the other rooms, and he taped out the whole room while the guy was, working on one corner or whatever. And then, he just nonchalantly walked in there and, said hello, and they had a little chit chat. And then he sort of walked them into the other room, and everything was done.
Yeah.
And the guy couldn't believe it. Like, what just happened? Well, who did this? Like, what, and then he showed him the tools and told him, I did this while you were just, working on that one corner or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was absolutely blown away. And that was, probably the beginning of the success story.
That seems pretty consistent to a lot of success stories in the drywall space. Is almost like you have to show people, myself included, we're very resistant creatures by nature. And I think drywall lends itself to very formulaic systems that people get locked into. I want to go to work. I want to do my job. I collect my paycheck, and I don't want to expand outside of that. So for us drywallers to learn something new is challenging. And it's almost like we have to be slapped in the face or shown, like, check this out. This is quicker. While you were doing that corner, I finished this whole room. It's brilliant, really. Now, did he take that model and start utilizing that going onto job sites and maybe doing that in other areas?
I think it was more word of mouth from there on, most likely. Yeah. Yeah. People just started to, it just took off, and slowly, within the Alberta or Edmonton market for sure, and where we are, and then, the whole province probably started, because there's the dealers have, they've got them in the dealerships that sell the tools are in the bigger cities. And of course they, word gets out and people start trying things.
Sure. And then real quick, what does CanAm, where did that name come from?
Well, that's Canadian American. I think that was the original intention of it. It came from back in the 70s, actually, now that you mention it. There used to be CanAm races. They were like car races, and they would they would have them both in Canada and the US, and they would travel around the different cities and drive around the track, and and that's probably where the name CanAm came from originally, and everybody loved that, so I guess he loved that too, and it was a good name. So a lot of companies, if you look, you'll find a lot of CanAms out there in Canada, maybe not in the US.
Yeah. And well, there was Pan Am was the air.
Right. That's right.
The flight early on, Pan Am was a big deal. Very interesting. So he ran that company for a while, and then Wolfgang Dombrowski, he was wandering down the street one day, and he saw a sign on the side of the road that said "Help Wanted," and he. How did you find those guys?
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I used to, before that, in 88, I started my own manufacturing. It was basically a machine shop, and I did design machining, and, basically had a job shop. So I made custom tools or custom equipment, or did, specialized machining. I used to work at the University of Alberta, and we used to build lasers when I was there. So I was kind of connected with the high-tech industry for quite a few years.
What's your background there?
Well, my background basically there was a machinist. I worked in in the electrical engineering shop where we built, or any professors and the grad students would design all kinds of interesting stuff that was never made before, and we'd make it for them. And
so you're a college professor?
No, not at all.
No.
I'm a tradesman.
You're a tradesman.
I came out of the trades. My first job was in a tire shop.
Yeah, but you had to have credentials to have that.
Well,
what's your education?
Well, I took a number of I've got two apprenticeships and I've got three trades, three designated trades. They call them Red Seal in Canada, and power engineering. I worked in a number of different places when I was younger, and I didn't last for more than a couple of years, and I'd be gone to the next job. And fortunately, there was lots of opportunity for an education, and it wasn't expensive when I was young.
Right.
You could go to school, you could get, in Canada at least, you didn't have to pay much. And so I took advantage of every educational opportunity that came around.
Well, back then, education was kind of reserved for people that were smart. Like if you weren't good at school, you were more likely to get into a trade, and that sort of shifted to where college is more, it's more based on, making money, and they're letting more people in, and, it's more of an industry. uh, you know,
We have a number of trade schools in Canada, and of course, in order to become a recognized tradesman, it's a pretty grueling
okay.
time. It's not a cakewalk to get a ticket.
Right. Right.
So, you have to.
So how did you find CanAm?
Well, so I used to, work out of my garage, and one of my neighbors, he was a construction guy, and he and I made friends. And he used to see my lights on late at night, and like I'd be working my buns off like everybody else does.
Yeah.
And I remember he came over one day and chit chatted. He says, there used to be a guy just across the alley from us here that started this company, and he made tools in his garage, just a few doors down from where I was. Of course, he was gone by that time, but so he said, yeah, he moved into St. Albert, in one of the towns, and he says he's got a shop there, and I think he's still making these things. You should go see him. So I kind of put that on the back burner, never really thought too much about it. And then another friend of mine, I had a couple of mentors, another friend, when I was machining and stuff, he says, Wolfgang, you should really get a product. You really need a product of your own rather than just doing, work for other people. And he said, it's probably right under your nose. You just don't even see it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, what could that be? Okay, I've a while figured out. So then I thought, hey, I should go see Fritz because he's got a product. And, he was an older guy by that time too. And so I went and introduced myself, and and then I told him what I did, and he said, hey, I could use some of your services. I could, could you make some parts for me? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And so he started giving me work, making parts for CanAm, which I would then send to him. And then one day I said, I'm interested in buying your company if you ever want to sell.
What did that look like, though? I mean, you were making money. How were you making money at that point? It was the college?
No, I had my own shop. I had my own.
So you were making stuff. How were you? How would you get a check? People come to you with projects?
Yeah, they'd come to me with a project. I had my milling machines, my lathes, and my fabrication equipment, and they'd give me a drawing, or a lot of times they would just come to me with an idea. Said, hey, can you make this? And
Neat.
And work off a napkin sketch or something, and I would do that. That was what I was pretty good at.
Yeah.
I didn't like working from drawings particularly because it constrained me. It made me, forced me to follow the rules, and I didn't like that. I always liked it when people came to me with stuff that gave me more scope, where I could just do what I wanted. And,
maybe an explanation or something like, hey, Wolfgang, I've got this idea for this neat thing. What do you have an example of a neat thing that you helped somebody make that became successful?
Well, I was thinking probably the neatest thing, well, one of them is in CanAm at least, would be that AccuJust flusher that we came out with. And I didn't just, invent it. There's another, basically the invention is the hinge. It's a hinged flusher, or corner finisher that ranges between, I think, 130, I'm not sure, 80 to 135 degrees or something to that effect. 72 to 135, I think it is. But anyways, they spent 10 years in the development of this, and they spent over $100,000 trying to make it work. And, he went around, in fact, everybody knows who I'm talking about. And they tried to get other companies to make this, and nobody wanted it. And I took it on eventually, and I said, I'll do it. And, yeah, it took us a fair amount of money and a couple of years to figure it out, but we finally, got it to work. And so that was a pretty big accomplishment, is the AccuJust flushers that we make. They're typically used for offset corners. So there's nothing else like it. It's the only one of its kind. It's, a patented product.
Cool. And so when you got a job with CanAm, he would give you projects. Were you on salary? Were you like on salary at that time? What was your title?
No, I ran my own company. I had another company called Vantech Consulting. And so I would just work on contract. They would give me the projects. I had my own shop, my own equipment, and I'd, go back and do the work.
You'd be like $5,000. I'll make this for you. Something like that.
Yeah, that kind of an idea. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Neat. So you were like, why the heck am I making tools for this company? I could just be running this company.
Well, I wanted a product, right? I wanted to get away from the job shop, from the, I wanted something that I could call my own. And rather than working for other people and making them rich, I decided I should figure out how to do that for myself, right?
Why did you choose drywall?
Well, I didn't choose. Nobody chooses drywall. You know
that. Oh, man. Hey, if you're listening and you want to get rich, just go away from drywall, man. No, this is a bad road to go down, man.
I don't know if you get rich in drywall, but it's necessary. It's you can make a good living. Obviously, a lot of people do. It's obviously not everybody does that well with it, depending on where you live and what kind of work you do, and and it takes a lot of talent. And it's not just when you're in business. I had to learn this. It's not about how good you are in the trade. When you're business, it's a whole different dimension. You have to understand how business works. And most of us that come out of the trades, we have no clue how a business is run. So, we can't run a business. We can do the job really good.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to grow a company, or how to hire, how to work with people, or, there's so much more to running a business than being a tradesman. And unfortunately, they don't teach us that in the schools. You have to go out and figure that out on your own.
No, I call that the hustle, but and unfortunately too, a lot of drywall finishers, you jump into running your own business, and that's something a lot of finishers don't take into consideration, the taxes and the background, the estimating and we talk a little bit about that on the podcast, like how to bid jobs, and not undercut yourself, because you're not making an hourly rate anymore. You got to make $100 an hour, $200 an hour to turn a profit. It's a different mindset than I'm going and collecting a check for $25 an hour. The taxes are automatically taken out. Like all that gravy train, I go home, I drink a few beers, and I call it a day. That's not the case with running a business. It sort of consumes you, and you have to be of the entrepreneurial mindset that and you have to enjoy what you do. I think one thing that's very smart about your story is that you were gravitating towards what you wanted to do. You had an intrinsic knowledge of, I don't want to be doing this. I would prefer to be doing that. But you also didn't have any business skills or knowledge going in. I think that's just something, like you're saying, you kind of have to cut your teeth, as they say, when you jump into a business. But it probably catered to your problem solving mind, you come up with these problems and you solve them as you go.
Well, back in the day, there were lots of courses at night. You could go to night school in the Technical Institute and take, business classes, which I did. And even at the university, there were classes there that I took. And so I just basically self-educated and went wherever I thought I needed some help.
Yeah. 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 Nowadays it's called YouTube.
Right.
Oh, you want to start a podcast? It's like
Yeah.
YouTube. Like, how the hell do people do this? Yeah. It's podcast is no different, man. There's a lot to this stuff.
Oh,
Like it's crazy hard. But those skills, really aided in those problem solving skills aided in learning something new, for me and doing this. And much like another thing I'm sort of gleaming from your story is like I thought that my product would just blow up automatically. You don't think about marketing. You don't think about like, oh, you have to get this idea out there, and doubly, you're getting this idea out there to a market that could give two shits about it. Like nobody cares about new ideas in drywall. This isn't like I developed a new microchip in the tech industry. They're always looking for new ideas.
right.
Drywall, a bit more resistant. You got to go and tape out a whole room and then come show the guy, look, this works. I'm telling you, that's interesting. But what I've learned is that, and this sort of parallels your story, is that there's nobody else was going to do it. Nobody else was going to do this thing. Like I've been blessed with this, or cursed with this task of bringing color to the market. Like this is bestowed upon you,
Yeah.
and this is my calling. It would
Right.
be the
Yeah.
best word, and it's not about getting at first. Yeah, it's like, oh, I want to get rich, but then that's an interesting question. Like, what is rich? As I'm sure you've sort of analyzed that. What is success? What is rich? And that's, I'll ask you that question. What is being rich, and has that changed from what you thought it was to what it is now?
I think for me, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is I never wanted to be dependent on the government for one thing, for my
Yeah.
pension or I wanted to be self-sufficient and have enough to look after myself and our family. So I think, that from a financial perspective I remember years ago when I first got into business, I went to an insurance company, to get life insurance. Of course, they always try to upsell you on things. And they basically did an analysis and they said, when you retire, basically they said you need $1 million. That was back years ago. They said you have to have at least $1 million in, for retirement income.
Okay.
And it just blew me away. Where am I ever going to get $1 million? It's like, it was an impossible, unbelievable amount of money. It's still a lot. And,
Yeah.
and that always resonated with me. Well, how am I going to have $1 million for my retirement, at least, so that you can live? And I was only going to get $35,000 a year, like 3.5%, it wasn't a lot of money. So
yeah,
I have to figure something out. And I didn't want to be dependent on the government, like I said, and because I had to start figuring out how to make money. And I guess for me, and it wasn't with CanAm, by the way, or anything else. It was really getting involved in real estate and buying properties.
Okay.
That was where I found I could leverage my money. See, your business makes you your money, but your investments make your wealth. So it's really important to have both, both an investment and a source of income.
Yeah. My good buddy's a commercial realtor, but he, if you're a good commercial realtor, you learn how to invest very quickly,
So we've always, bought our own properties. We don't. Okay. I don't like renting. I like owning if I can.
Yeah. Yeah, and property is just a fantastic. Although it's gotten more unstable lately, but it's still. My dad always said, "Man, you buy a house, it'll never lose its value. It's only going to go up. But property only goes up in value."
it might dip occasionally for a year or two, but it'll come back. Typically.
Right. So, do you or your wife have commercial real estate Do you dabble in that? I mean, are either one of you a commercial realtor?
I took the training, but I never became a realtor.
Okay.
Um, no, we're just investors basically.
Yeah.
Not big time investors. We found some smaller properties that we bought, and we basically lease those out.
Okay. All right. Back to CanAm. We're gonna bore our audience with real estate talk. That's for sure. It bores me.
It's
My
supposed,
wife said
it's real estate's supposed to be boring. That's
the
one thing
point
that
is wealth versus being rich. I think is the takeaway from that conversation. What was the other one? Oh, success. I mean, you know, that's an interesting one to me too. That's one I always wrestle with. My take is like success is as soon as you decide to go, like you find your path and you start going on that path, no matter what, to me, that really defines success. Like you've win or lose, you've become successful at that point because you've risked something. And I don't know what your definition is, but everybody seems to have a different definition of success.
it's a good one. Well, I think obviously knowing what you want, and then being able to achieve your goal to find to eventually get where you want to go is, I think, is a way to define success. you
Yeah.
know but you really have to know what you want to begin with, and otherwise you're never going to get it right.
Yeah. See, you ultimately take over CanAm Tools. You bought it from the previous owner?
Yes.
Okay. Zero drywall experience. But by this time you were aware of the
Oh,
trade and
I often looked at myself as an engineer. I like the analogy of a pilot and an engineer. The pilot flies the plane, the engineer builds it, right? So I don't need to know how to be a drywall finisher, but I have to be able to understand what it takes, to build something. So, that's why I like working with people, and they basically tell me what they need, and what it has to do and how it works. I can watch it, I can feel it, see it, try it, and
yeah.
then make it work.
That is interesting. So from your standpoint, you haven't had the millions of hours that some of these people have had on the tools, but you have that ability to listen to somebody from early on and take that information and make your products better.
I had one bad experience in drywall, like everybody.
Only one.
Well, the first one, I think it was like
You heard it here. What can't Wolfgang of CanAm Tools? You have one bad experience. Let's hear it.
I tell you, I was about probably 12 or 13 years old, and my dad had a buddy who was a photographer, and he had a studio. And so the buddy was, doing some drywall work on one of the walls. I don't know what he was trying to skim it or something. I can't. Anyways, he made this huge mess of, putting drywall all over this wall. And then he hired me. It was a Saturday. I took a bus and went downtown and went to his studio, and he asked me, I had to sand this thing down. And it was the worst job in the world, to sand this wall that he'd messed up. And
Yeah.
I guess that was my, I never forgot that. I said, man, I
Yeah.
never want
Never
this
again. That cured you. You're like,
help
I
me
know
out.
I know what you guys are doing. I'll adjust the edge of the flesher. We'll make it a little better. Don't just you go do that. I'm gonna work on the tool and we'll get along just fine. Yeah.
And I
Oh
didn't get,
man, those
I didn't get,
sanding days just
oh
that'll
man,
that'll crush an apprentice. If you're training up somebody, man, don't just have them sand all day long because that's a good way to lose an apprentice right there. You got to
that's a good,
let them spot screws or something. Give them some time off because sanding is a gnarly aspect of this trade.
yeah.
Very cool. So you take over the company in 2000. What changes do you make right away? And what you have a direction sort of that you want to see the company. That's pretty recent, honestly, on the timeline. 2000 is not that long ago.
Well, actually, it was interesting when I bought the company. I had another another location. I had a nice building that I was working out of, but I actually sold it so that I could finance the purchase of CanAm.
Okay.
Probably made a mistake, but anyways, so I moved into the shop where
Yeah,
CanAm
that
was.
building's worth 2 billion now, by the way.
I know I should have sold. That was the dumbest thing ever. But anyways, live and learn, right? So I moved into the shop with Fritz, and he was quite actually disappointed in that I did that, because he expected me to move out and move it into the other nicer location, right? But I just took over his shop, and I honestly I learned the lesson. I didn't change anything for the first 6 months. I didn't change anything at all. I just learned from him and watched him and observed, and because he was there, I hired him on contract, and he did a little bit of work for me. He
Okay.
kept building the flushers, and I did everything else, and didn't make too many changes. In fact, some of my customers didn't have any confidence in me at all. When I went into the stores and introduced myself, they kind of looked me up, sized me up, and said, "Gee,
Yeah.
who are you? You don't know squat. You know nothing, right?" And
Yeah.
it was a little demoralizing, but I said, "Hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm not worried." But they didn't have any confidence at all, right? It was a
Okay.
little not a very nice situation, but hey,
Yeah.
I. But later on, they were pretty impressed. They were happy that things did work out. So,
Yeah, your personality won them over. You're like,
well,
whatever. They'll come around eventually.
well, we did some. One of the things that Fritz used to do was he used to use WD-40 on. He used to spray all his tools, in order to get the fingerprints off. He would just spray them down with his WD-40, and the salesman hated that because it would make get their hands dirty, and it was greasy. And so, I mean, that was the first thing I stopped doing. That made them happy.
What'd you
Some
use instead of WD?
Oh, we just washed them. I got a dishwasher, threw them in the dishwasher, and cleaned them.
There you go.
I wiped them down with something, but sometimes it's just the littlest things, the simple things that can make the biggest difference in the minds of people.
Yeah. So you considered, I mean, that was probably an issue that the people
Oh
brought
yeah,
to you. They were like, "Hey man, can we do something else?" And you listened to them and you were like, "Yeah, of course we can do something else. We can make this
yeah,
better." You know?
yeah, yeah. So little improvements, just small improvements, continually making it a little bit better, and oftentimes they're not even noticeable to the others, but eventually you do see a big difference.
Yeah. And you liked that right away, I'll bet. You liked running the business and taking over and having control over all of those various little decisions.
Yeah, it was hard. In fact, one of the contractors that did a lot of the work originally, as soon as I took over the business and I went to, get some more parts made, some of the fab parts, they actually told me, "No, we're not doing any more work for you. That's it. We're done." So my first experience after taking over the business to get, the other shops to make parts that were contracted out, some of them, one of the biggest players decided that they didn't want anything to do with me because they had such, I guess, they were buddies with Fritz, but they really didn't want to do this. And so I actually it put me kind of frightened me there for a while, because I didn't even know how I was going to make this, because all the tooling they just sent it back and said, "We don't want this anymore. Here, it's yours." And I had no clue how I was going to make it. But it actually was a blessing in disguise, because, we used to use hard tooling to make our flushers, and ended up just going into another company that used lasers. And then
Okay.
we started cutting, using better technology and working with some younger guys. And, we figured out another way to do things. So sometimes the old ways, they have to you have to change things up every once in a while as well. Sometimes it's good
Yeah.
to get forced, get kicked in the butt, and it forces you to think differently.
Yep, that was a forced change. I'm dealing with a little one of those right now where I'm having a problem with a product, and I'm
Yeah.
forcing me. You want to get mad, or at least I want to get mad, and but it drives like a different way of doing things, or like maybe we should do, I've always wanted to do it in house, like like have control. I like that. It's like, well, I want to learn how to do that and make it myself so that I know how it's done and how it
Mhm.
needs to be done so that it can be done properly.
Yeah. Well, it's impossible to make everything in house, right? It's not even, you can't realistically do that. There's so many components to, like
Sure.
you're going to make your plastic bottles in house, or you're going to,
Yeah. Yeah.
you formulate everything, and you have to buy raw materials from everybody
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
put them together.
Yeah, and then we had a during COVID, we had a supply chain issue with the plastic bottles, and we were getting orders. You get down to the bottom of the bottle, and
Right.
these guys didn't have it, so I had to order from somebody else. Like that kind of weird stuff I've never dealt with.
Mhm.
Scary. It gets scary and unsure, and
And the
then you
cost,
get
sometimes the pricing is just unreasonable. It's not even profitable, but somehow you
right.
have to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I kind of like that stuff though. I'm an entrepreneur. I have an entrepreneur spirit, and it's that now it's more like it's like, oh, okay, this is a problem. It's got a solution. We'll get through this, just like we got through the last 80,000 problems. No big deal. um, cool, Wolfgang. And there's a story about do you know a person named Kevin Bush? There was a
Yeah. You,
so I did an interview with Kevin Bush. He wrote Adventures in Drywall for Walls and Ceilings magazine, and he is just a character. He was telling me about a tape story where they had come up with a mudless tape, and
oh,
you had started to fabricate a tool. And he even said, he was like, he might not like me very much, but he's a nice guy. And I was like, oh, Wolfgang won't care. But you had started fabricating a tool for this specific invention. This it's a tape that you could get wet with water, and it would activate a glue, and it would stick to the
right.
wall. Well, it failed, and I guess maybe you were, at the time you were tooling a product, you had seen the value in it, you spent a bunch of time, and then maybe that was just a big waste of time.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. Yeah, we were working with, well, my motivation was, we always have motivation, and
Yeah.
they were working with Grabber. And so Grabber's a big company, and they have a
Yeah.
lot of locations. I thought, wow, if I could get my products into Grabber, I'd have it made, right? Life would
Yeah.
be good. Just like if you got yours into a big, chain like that.
Sherwin Williams or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I did it. I didn't, that was my ulterior motive. So, but I gave it my best shot, and we came up with a dispenser for this wet and stick product, and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and money into this thing. I invested quite a bit of my own money to make it work. And
Sure.
we found something, we got it to work. It was tough. It wasn't easy, but the product itself, the deactivated when it got wet, and so it didn't stick properly. So it wasn't my, had nothing to do with me.
The truck drove through a rainstorm. You end up getting to the job with a bunch of clumps of just clumps of paper.
It was a good learning experience, right? And they met
Do you
some.
have any of those roles? Do you have any of those roles kicking around the shop?
I have a lot of it. There was another company that tried to do it as well,
Okay.
and I've got a whole warehouse full of this stuff.
But I was like, and I told Kevin, I was like, well, like it worked, right? It just didn't work under these circumstances. It seems like maybe they gave up too quick, or you get one large failure like that where it's like, oh, all the tape's got to come out. We got to redo all this walls. Like one fail like that'll kill a product that easily. It seems like, well, it seemed like it was viable. You could have like pushed through that and kept going with it if somebody was passionate about it.
Oh, I'm sure they could have. Well, like I say, there was another company that started up after Wet and Stick, and it was called Hydro Tape. And
Okay.
when they found me, they called me and they wanted me to help them figure it out. And so we weren't that busy at the time. Things were, when it's slow, I'll take on projects for other people.
Well,
And
you enjoy doing that anyways.
no, I don't do it much anymore, but there was a time when I did it a lot more. We do it for ourselves now rather than for others.
Right.
But anyways, I said I'd take it on, and we started developing another dispenser. Unfortunately, the principal passed away, in the midst of it all, and so the whole thing came to another abrupt end. So
Interesting. And
yeah.
now, are there any like, innovations or tools that you've created in-house that have flopped, that you spent a lot of time on and they just didn't pan out?
I don't want to talk about it. Oh, we have so many things that didn't work. You have to.
What's a good one? What's a good one that you really thought was going to work? This is going to work. I'm going to really flesh it out. And you tried it out in the industry. Well, maybe one where you let some people try it out and they were just like, Wolfgang, what are you thinking, dude? This is horrible.
Oh man, I can't. I mean, I think we were working on an extendable box handle. Like, we had a whole bunch of different ideas and probably spent a bit of time trying to figure it out. And I still have the prototypes and everything here, but it was another one of those like learning experiences. And some of these things aren't as easy to do as once you start getting into product development, and then you build a few prototypes, then you realize how much more complicated this is than what you thought initially. And then usually, you have to just sink more money, if you hire engineering, or if you have your own engineer on house, you can spend months and months and, hundreds of tens of thousands of dollars developing a product. And it may not work at the end of the day. That's, or you hit the big roadblock we often hit is the production cost. We'll say, okay, we got something that works. It's great. It's cool. And then we go out and get it, quote for getting molds made and tooling.
Okay.
It's just not feasible, but you can't do a feasibility study until you have something to show.
Right.
So there's lots of failures. I've been talking about it all day long, but
well, and then also likewise, of course, there's successes, but you have to almost vet tools as well. I was just talking with Level 5 about their mixer. I was like, I like those mixers. They do have drawbacks. I had a sort of a mixer experiment where I tried a bunch of different mixers, and I really liked the design of the Level 5 mixer. And I had to use it for a long time. Same with the trowels. Like, you got to really vet some of these tools. So it might not be until down the road that it's like, oh, that's why that doesn't work, or we're going to change direction here. What was a big, successful product that you guys came out with that you're very proud of? What's your favorite? You make a lot of tools, but there's probably one that has a sweet spot for you.
Well, I think the most recent one that comes to mind is our extendable handles. And the handles are pretty well received and people like them. But they have a locking mechanism that sometimes gets, if they're not cleaned properly, if the tool, gets mud in it or water, or if it's dirty, whatever, those mechanisms will fail eventually. And so then the tool either jams up, and if it was left in a locked position too long, or if it's dirty, it may not lock. So there's a couple of issues that people end up having. So, and it's agonizing for us, when we hear people, having bad experiences with the tools, because that's the last thing we don't want. We don't want to have that happen at all. I mean, especially as a tradesman myself, I understand the agony of having something that doesn't work, especially when you're counting on it.
People don't realize when they criticize. I mean, I get the whole the value of constructive criticism, and it's also valuable for us to take criticism. But that is really, it hits the heartstrings, it hits that failure, that intrinsic failure mechanism in my body that, that just like, People don't realize, when you do that, when you outwardly or online or something go bash a tool, like that affects you, doesn't it? Like you're on social media, and somebody talks trash, it hurts.
Yeah, it does. I mean, sometimes, you know, but that's life. You have to just do something about it. I guess it's, that's just just lets us know that there's an issue. And then when, hear enough of that, that's why we improve things.
Right.
So
Right.
we track, we track all of our returns, and, every periodically we go through our list and see, well, how many, what's come back and what's the reason for it. And, if we see that there's an issue, we'll do our best to correct it. So that,
Okay.
that's good business, I believe. And,
Yeah.
we don't, it's just treating people the way we want to be treated. Unfortunately, we'd love to make things a lot better. Sometimes as I said earlier, there's just constraints. Sometimes for reasons, it's just not possible right now to make everything, perfect. So, we're not in heaven yet, I say sometimes, right? I mean, if we were in heaven, everything would work perfectly, but, we're still living in this world. So things do break, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
But
and two, it's the yin and yang of life. I mean,
yeah,
you wouldn't have the successes without the failures, so.
yeah, yeah.
But that criticism, that is a tough one, man. I got caught up in a conversation recently where somebody went onto a post and they started to bash, and I messaged them on the side. I was like, "Hey, man, you've
Yeah.
never even used my product. Why are you bashing it?" And I told him,
Right.
like, straight up, I was like, this affects me, man. I got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this stuff, and I shouldn't do that, but I got caught up in it, and
Well,
that's a tough part.
I think if it's not justified or if it's done with the wrong motivation, we have to stand up for ourselves. And,
Yeah.
I've done stuff. I'll reply to somebody's message that I think, is unfounded. If I don't think, he's being fair, then I gotta talk back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it had nothing to do with the guy. It was a side post. Somebody was promoting my stuff, and he just went on the thread and was like, "Oh, you can do it better this other way. Just do this X, Y, and Z." And it's like, whoa, 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 dude, you're going out of your way to bash a product that you've never even used, you know? But even in retrospect, like I had a great, he was a cool dude. We had a good conversation and we sort of arrived at a conclusion that was like, okay, hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate you, no offense. He didn't mean any offense by it. I made something up in my head about it, that whole thing. Very
Mhm.
cool. So this locking handle, that's a newer tool?
No, it's basically a feature that we've implemented in the bushing, so we can now basically disassemble the handle. So
Okay.
it, and then it can be cleaned and repaired if necessary. So that was a big undertaking to figure out how to make this removable bushing. We spent a lot of time and to figure it out, but we were very pleased when we finally got it to work. And not only that, but
Sure.
we built the tooling in house to punch the tubing. There's a couple of holes in the tubing that we had to introduce in order for the bushing to lock. And so we made all that in house, and it turned out amazingly well. And I think we were all just elated to how we're so happy to have solved that problem. To the
Okay.
best.
So when you solve a problem like that, you create something that's really awesome. What's your first step? Do you like give it to Kayla, give it to some of these influencers, see how they like it? What's your process in getting that to the market?
Yeah, we have a few influencers that people who product testers that we like to work with, and we'll send it out to them and get some feedback. Yeah, that's typically, or if it's a no-brainer, then obviously we don't need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, we like the obviously we need feedback for the
Yeah.
most. Yeah,
Okay. Very
and
cool. Very cool.
I mean, I should also say, like, I've got a really good team of people here at CanAm. We've got there's only there's only 8 people altogether with my wife and I. There's the 6 people that work for us, and
That's cool.
but they're a great crew, and several of them have been here for over 10 years. So that's also, good. And I've been in business doing this since 2000. So, it's been 23 years now coming up. But, having good people working with you is really what it's all about at the end of the day. Having dependable staff that cares about the product. These guys
Yeah.
care. They oftentimes, I'll just say, I think we can send this out, and they'll say, we can't send that out. Like you got to have people backing you up sometimes. And,
Yeah.
like it's really good to have people that care a lot about the product. And I have to tell you that our employees care, a lot about producing a good product. We take a lot of pride in it. And we know that we're providing a product that helps people earn their livelihood. That's what really, I think, gives us the most joy, is the fact that we're making tools that people use to actually earn a living, and
Yeah.
that to me gives us a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah. Why do you think that your employees are like that? Why do you think they care?
Well, I think like anybody, they just it's their work ethic. They're just brought up that way, that you do a good job. There are a couple of the guys that they're actually, it's just from their upbringing, and
Sure.
they just believe that you have to do a good job. Like anybody, I think most people, pretty much everybody, tries to do a good job. That's just intrinsic in who we are, right?
Should be.
And then if you want to keep your job, of course, it's that's pretty important
Yeah.
too.
I thought you were going to say it's because you pay them a ton of money.
Well, we do pay them pretty good. I think that's another. It's important.
Yeah.
We don't we don't. I think they're all happy with their pay. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
always would like more, of course, but we do our
Yeah.
best to pay our employees.
Do you have a
And
good model? Do you have a good model for raises and bonuses and like that sort of thing that you feel like helps keep employee retention?
I don't know if it's a good one or not, but it's, we use our discretion, and it depends on our
Okay.
profitability and how well we do. And, we share the wealth as much as we can, to whatever, and I mean, I'm the sole owner of it. Eventually, I would like to see it move on to Zach. He's our manager. So he's in the wings of perhaps taking over the business in the future. So, and then it'll be up to him to run it.
Yeah. Why Zach?
Well, Zach's a good guy. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a young guy. He's brilliant. He has a really good education. Um, he's I think he's very good financially as well. I think he can be able to run this company very well, and he's a team player. That's a really nice thing about Zach. He's really much of a team player, and whereas I've been kind of more of an individualist, and but you have to be a team player in order to grow a business, and to get people working with you. He's really good. He understands retail quite well. So I think that's a real asset, so he looks at it from a retail perspective. He looks at the business, from a different perspective. Well, I'm more of a production guy. I see it from the back end quite a bit, and it takes more than one person to be able to be successful, to run a successful business as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have our like strengths and weaknesses. It's good
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
recognize that, I struggle with that. With like building that community, around Fresco Harmony. It's very close to me. It's very hard for me to let go and like listen to other people's input and like really let that go. But I try, Ingrid in my studio, she comes up with fantastic ideas all the time to create more productivity and better productivity and things like that, and so I have to really practice that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes they say you make more money when you let when you're gone from the business sometimes, right? So in other words,
Yeah.
you just have to let the others take over, because if you do everything yourself, I mean, you'll always be doing it anyway. So sometimes you just have to let it go and, trust that it's going to work out. If you've got
Yeah.
people with character, they're going to do a good job for you. You can learn skills. Skills can be taught, but character really can't. So, I mean, it does. You can improve. Everybody can improve, but if you've got good people surrounding you, then you can teach them. They'll learn on their own or whatever, and things will go well for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Pearl of wisdom from the great Wolfgang sorry, Dombrowski. I almost said Lebowski, like
Yeah.
what would your pearl of wisdom be?
That's a really good question. I was thinking of that. I guess really at the end of the day, I think it's persistence. Let's just, be persistent, and don't give up. Just keep, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be and I think, well, if you're married, it's really good to have your spouse's encouragement too. You have to be on the same page. It's really hard to do this on your own as an entrepreneur. So, having some good support, whomever it is really, really important. Somebody that can speak into your life and encourage you when things go sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. How long have you and Faye been together?
40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Fair to say you know her pretty well?
Yeah. We're still learning.
Always. Just like the tools, man. Just like the trade. Wolfgang Dombrowski, thank you so much for being on the Drywall Podcast today. This was an absolute pleasure. There's probably some stuff we didn't cover. I'm sure there's room for a CanAm Tools interview part 2, maybe with Zach. We'll get his on round 2, we'll get his input. He's a little younger. We'll talk more about social media and marketing and influencers and that sort of thing with him. But for now, we will see you at Build 23. Wolfgang's got a booth next to me, and hopefully by the time this drops, we'll have had that experience, and maybe we'll see some of the characters from that are listening at Build 23 this year or in future years. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you having me on your program.
Yeah, absolutely. And also thank you for supporting the Drywall Podcast too. That's very cool. I think it's a win-win for everybody. CanAm gets some props. It helps me, make this happen. So we really appreciate you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, sir. You have a good day. We'll talk soon.
Take care. Bye for now.
Yeah, bye. Special thanks to Wolfgang Dombrowski for being with us on the Drywall Podcast today. We appreciate your time and value your wisdom. The months of March and April on the Drywall Podcast are brought to you exclusively by CanAm Tools. You can head over to the CanAm Tool website, canamtools.com, and receive a discount throughout the months of March and April if you enter promo code TDP15. The Drywall Podcast was also brought to you by Fresco Harmony, making walls better since 2004. Now you can get Fresco Harmony if you go to csrbuilding.com. If you have questions about the Drywall Podcast, CanAm Tools, Fresco Harmony, or anything, you can email me directly at info@frescoharmony.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Drywall Podcast today. I sincerely appreciate it. Tune in next Friday when we have another amazing adventure in drywall with the great Kevin Bush, episode 2 of our ongoing series with him. But until then, keep drywalling.